All right. I think we are ready to begin. So, welcome everybody. Good evening if you're joining us here on the East Coast. Good afternoon from the West Coast. Good morning from Australia, where our dear and esteemed Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf is joining us from. It's like the other side of the world. It's a different temperature. It's been raining a whole day here in Miami, so maybe you're used to that coming to the winter season there in Australia. So welcome. This is a meditation workshop that we're doing, especially now during this very difficult, challenging, strange time for the world. So we're looking into some self-management tips during this pandemic. Thank God here in Miami, at least in our community here, Baruch Hashem, we haven't been terribly hit from a medical perspective, although all those who have been, all those who are ill, we are praying for, and we're studying tonight in their zchut, in their merit, they should have the healing speedily and completely that they need. God should bless them. Those families who have suffered losses, God should comfort them, God should strengthen them, and we are here with you, thinking with you and trying to comfort you. But we are alive and we're thankful for the gift of life that we have, but managing this life has not been easy. Whether you have one child or 5 children or 10 or none, whether you're with a spouse, whether you're alone, you're stuck at home. Maybe this week now, things started to open up here in Miami. We'll see how that goes. But it's been a big challenge. Our whole lives have become disrupted. We're very disoriented. And I think it's been difficult trying to get a grip on who we are, what we're doing, how to manage our days and our time and our identities. That's a challenge we have a whole year round, all life round, how much more so when these very new and awkward circumstances come to our way. So one of the tools we want to target on tonight is meditation. Meditation is something that we talk about a lot, and it's a very important practice. And I have a lot of conversations with people. We do some sessions, but we need to learn more about it and what it is and its techniques. And we thought, well, let's invite a real expert. Let's invite somebody who's invested decades of his life into spiritual teachings and into meditation, the practice, the theory of meditation. And he's none other than my dear uncle, Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf. So we're very excited that you're joining us today and in this presentation. And then also we have a chance for questions and answers. Some have already sent me the emails of the questions. Some of you will post, feel free to post on the Facebook. You have the link there, or post it on the video there. And we'll try to get to as many as we can. I think, Laibl, do we have a time limit? Can we go all night or all day by you? I'm sure that you have a lot of things to do as well. So thank you for taking this time. Now, as an introduction, I don't think Laibl needs much of an introduction, definitely in our community or to many that are watching here. But just in case he does and you're joining and meeting Laibl for the first time, well, good for you. He's somebody you want to meet. And I'll read a little bit about him. So Laibl is often described as the Jewish synthesis between Deepak Chopra and Tony Robbins. So he's a spiritual mentor and a worldwide teacher of spirituality for many decades. His expertise blends contemporary positive psychology with ancient Kabbalah to facilitate the behavioral approach to life training. Laibl is trained in law and psychology and is an unusual blend of Hasidic rabbi and universal teacher. And he feels equally at home in a Buddhist ashram and in the synagogue. Laibl is the son of Polish Holocaust survivors. I know them very well. They happen to be my grandparents. Aleim Hashalom, Zichronam Livracha. Laibl is my father's brother. And he lives with his wife, Leah, in Melbourne, Australia. They have their 7 children. And actually, Laibl works together with one of his sons, Menachem, and they run the Spirit Grow Center in Melbourne, Australia, the Spirit Grow Holistic Growth Center, which maybe we'll get to hear more about tonight. So that's a very small nutshell about Laibl. So we're so glad that you're here with us. We're going to get started right away. If I may, I'm going to ask you a few questions just to get into the program, and then we have a lot of things we want to cover as much as possible. So I think a good starting point would be just to sort of cover the basics of the questions that go through most people's minds when they hear this word. It's a word called meditation, and for some people it has a connotation of something so mysterious and so esoteric and so advanced, and it's something that people in ashrams or on top of mountain hills, mountaintops, they do, but the average person who has a spouse and a family and a job and goes to the gym, etc., meditation is not for them. So I want to take a step back for a moment and ask the simple question, what is meditation? What are different kinds of meditations? What are some of the goals we're trying to achieve with this tool of meditation? Those are simple questions, but very loaded questions. And then the next segue that I'll mention now, but what I'd like to get into is, are there Jewish forms of meditation? We know there are non-Jewish forms of meditation, especially in Buddhism and other spiritual faiths. But would it be safe to say that are there some not just non-Jewish, but maybe un-Jewish forms of meditation? Meaning, is there something that we need to be wary of when it comes to meditation? That is an opening. I hope that helps. Laibl, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Eli. And thank you for that overly generous introduction. And it's a real pleasure to be with you and together with the participants. And I look forward to have a very good session together and to some extent interactive, so we can actually help each other move forward at a very difficult point in the road of life as such.
Laibl, I'm going to interrupt and pause you for 1 second. Some people are having trouble connecting.
Sure. Thank you.
Give me just 1 second. One second. All right, Laibl, sorry about that. We're with you.
Okay. If you were to consult our resident expert, Professor Google, as to what is meditation, you would probably get hundreds of different responses, versions, modalities, etc., and you'd be thoroughly confused. Would the real meditation please stand up? Truth to say, the word meditation is but a word. Certainly in the 60s and 70s, when some enterprising gurus made their way across from India to the West and introduced formats that reintroduced the word meditation, our thoughts about what meditation is tend toward Eastern postures, Eastern modalities, whereas the word meditation means something far more than just that. So let me back off a little bit and see if I can come at it in a different format. You were correct, Eli, when you described meditation as a tool. It is a tool. And if you look at all the various meditative modalities as such, you'll find there's a common denominator. The common denominator is focusing. But what you focus on, how you focus, and why you focus, the goal of the exercise, that varies from pathway to pathway, from spiritual system to spiritual system, through to the psychological intent for the therapeutic purposes, medicinal results, and also various goals that we might have. So first, remember that the word to meditate is a verb. We're doing something. And that something is a tool for a given purpose. So we have to ask ourselves, what might be the purposes that are really relevant today, and perhaps out of interest, look at some of the systems that operated in the past as well. Firstly, Jewish peoplehood have always practiced meditation as such. We've always focused. We have to ask ourselves why and how. Now, what we are is a combined energetic ball of flows of energy. And somehow or other, those energies coalesce into becoming a material format, physical format. Let me describe it like this. On this end of the spectrum, consider a spectrum. On this end of the spectrum, we have a very dense material called lead. Move further across on the spectrum, and you end up having something that's less dense, and we can call that wood. Move further across, and you have something which we call water, less dense. Further across, you have air. And then move further across, and you have components of air down to the molecular level, with van der Waals forces holding the molecules together. Move further across, and you have subatomic particles. And the physicists tell us that really there's mainly empty space. And they wonder why it is that you and I have shape and form when we're primarily made up of empty space. Maybe a discussion for later. And then further across, we have energy. But that's measurable energy. And further across, we have what underlies energy. Call it spiritual energy. Call it spirituality. And that too has infinite degrees. So the spectrum moves from the densest to the least dense. And what is lead, the most dense? Spirituality that's become very, very dense as such. Therefore, if I describe you and I as a ball of consciousness, which means the coalescence of all the energies that make up the human being, what meditation is to be able to direct the flow of consciousness for specific purposes. Meditation means the coalescence of the energies of the body, the spirituality, the finite energy, becoming finite component parts called the body, to direct the flow of consciousness in the direction that we want. So let's make this now much more practical. In today's world, where we're assailed by coronavirus, and we have a sense of fear and trepidation and anxiousness, and we're stressed by it, how do we change the posture of our consciousness from one of negative insecurity and fear into one of positivity and confidence? What I have to do is I have to change the shape of that spiritual ball of energy, which is me. And you know what? We can do it. You and I have the capacity to be able to direct the flow of consciousness. One more point. Let me make it simpler in the following format. We're made up of two component parts. Let me now say we are an energy flow that courses through a physical shape, a physiological set of containers, our body. When that energy, let's call now the energy the neshama, the spiritual energy that flows through us, that's connected on high to its source, to the source of the energy. When it flows through the physiology, the machinery of the ear, our human experience is called hearing. When it flows through the physiological machinery of eye, then that experience becomes known as seeing. And through the brain, which is just a container, a complex container, a very, very complex set of physical components put together, it becomes mind. Our experience becomes thought, and the different subsets of thought leading to understanding, and all the different aspects of analysis. So in other words, we are made up of the spiritual energy called neshama and the physical container called body. And here comes the point. I can, in many ways, direct the flow of energy through those component parts. And I'm going to stick in our discussion to the one called brain. Because the way that I choose to think determines my feelings, and my emotional life plays a huge role in my fulfillment quotient of happiness and fulfillment. Why do I say mind determines my emotions? Because that's the way it is. In other words, you don't have any feeling until you have an interpretation. You interpret something, the consequence is a feeling response. Now, that interpretation moment may be automatic and microsecond, so you're almost not aware of it at all, and you just have the feeling. And you say, oh, I'm just a feeling person. Not true. You may have a dominance of emotion flow, but nevertheless, every feeling is predetermined by a construct of mind, interpretation. So coming back to the basic question, meditation is a tool that you and I can utilize to change my interpretation of the moment and create, therefore, a different emotional atmosphere within me and around me, which radiates outwards and affects all those around me at the same time. I create my own atmosphere. I create my own ambience, my own setting. Have I made it clear that meditation is but a tool that I can use, and I can use it wisely, and later on perhaps I'll explain how we might use it unwisely. So Ellie, I could go on with this particular thing.
Yeah, I'm going to push you further. Yes, that was very clear and that was very deep. And I want to highlight one point that you made now. I think that's a good segue into my next question. So you talk about this channeling and this focusing of this energy, of this spiritual consciousness that we have of our soul through the rest of the medium of our body. And that it's done through the mind. The mind is that which channels. By the way, I just can't resist, but I have to say a joke that is highly appropriate for tonight. And the joke is, what do you call a mindful wolf? A werewolf. That one was for you and for me.
Thank you.
So this is an interesting point, because I think this is a state of confusion among many people about the goal of meditation. So if we think about meditation in other spiritual cultures, talk about Buddhism, for example, so they say that once somebody gave a birthday gift to the Dalai Lama, you've actually met the Dalai Lama, maybe we'll get a chance to hear about that meeting that you had with him. So they say that someone once gave a gift to the Dalai Lama for his birthday. It was a big box wrapped in a ribbon. He was very excited. He unties the ribbon, he opens the box, and inside was nothing. And he said, just what I've always wanted. So I think a lot of times meditation is associated with entering a space of nothingness, or trying to rid ourselves of this reality that we're in and enter that space of the unknown. Or is meditation about just a sense of relaxation of self? Or is meditation more about focusing various energies or various faculties within us in order to accomplish something? So could you maybe elaborate more on, are we just trying to enter a zone of nothingness, of blank Zen stillness? Or are we also, or is it different? Or does Jewish meditation have some of that component? Or are we trying to achieve something else? What would you say about that?
Let me share with you a joke as well. So the Buddhist monk sees a burger vendor, someone selling burgers, and he's tempted. He goes up, and the burger vendor asks him, "What would you like?" And he says, "Make me one with everything." That's it. Actus, oneness. Make me one with everything, with the universe.
One with everything.
All right. That might have gone over well or not. Yes, the functionality and purposefulness of meditation as such. So, for example, I could dichotomize the Jewish use of meditation into two directions. One is to internalize wisdom teachings so that my behavioral expression throughout the day and throughout my life is in accordance with that insight. I'll explain in a moment. And a second approach is that I want to change aspects of my body for health and wellness. And that includes mental health and wellness as well. Now you can see that these two are very, very different goals. Let me speak about the first one. We want to internalize a wisdom teaching. So in other words, you can already see that unlike some of the Eastern postures, it's nothing to do with emptying of the mind as much as filling the mind and filling the body as a consequence of that focus. So let me introduce a word, hisboinenus, which is one modality of Jewish meditation. Hisboinenus, which is the colloquialization of the Hebrew infinitive lehitbonen, which is, for the grammarians out there in our audience, the hitpael form of the verb, which means reflexive, to do with self. And it comes from the shoresh, the root bina, which we translate as understanding. So hitbonenut means to take understanding and make it flow through you reflexively. How do you do that? So there's mechanisms. Meditation isn't just the thing, it's a process. If you'd asked me, how do I practice hisboinenus? Well, before davening in the morning, before praying in the morning, I would sit down and study a deep philosophical discourse of one of the masters, one of the Rabbis. And I would try to seek out the kernel, the very, very point of that particular discourse in terms of its application to me, behaviorally. I'll then spend time working on myself so that it becomes part of me. That's part of what you would call the meditative process. Building it within me, creating a setting in my consciousness. And then through the course of the davening itself, I'll be applying it to the words as they appear in context of that focus. And finally, the test of its success would be, how do I express myself that day in my life, having utilized that insight teaching? All that is called hisboinenus. The actual process is the internalization moments when I try to make it within me. And I'm not describing here fully how you actually do that, although I'll try to share that with you shortly when we do actual exercise, time permitting. So that's one. On the other hand, I have another goal and approach. We have a mitzvah that says you must be healthy. To maintain health and wellness is as much a mitzvah as Shabbos, Kashrus, or anything else that you and I identify ostensibly as a religious mitzvah. The word mitzvah means to connect, to become one with something greater. So to be healthy means to ensure that my body, the container for the flow of energy of the soul, is optimized. Because if, God forbid, the body's not functional fully, then that prevents the ideal flow of the energy through it. That's why it's an absolute mitzvah to keep health and wellness. Moving to the mental side of health and wellness. When we are, God forbid, in a state of stress and anxious and worried and fearful, it's very, very likely that we aren't able to optimize the clarity of our life and live clearly. It becomes a haze or it becomes biased. Now, again, later on, it's another promise I make, I'm going to share with you how we can actually move away from postures of fear and stress and introduce some terminology. But there are meditative exercises, and very often using creative visualizations, that can allow us to change our mental state of being. One more little discussion before I turn it back to you, Ellie. You see, when a thought arises in my mind, I now know, as a result of contemporary scientific research, where we can observe the way that the brain operates by looking at it on screen. I'm going to be very simple in this and oversimplify. But when I have a thought, it means that there is a flow between two nerve end fibers, and the pathway is through a flow of neurotransmitters that flow from one nerve end fiber to another. It's much more complex than that, but that can be the substance of it, simplistically put. The more I think that thought, the more I'm likely to think that thought, because I create a groove of the mind. It's easier for me to do so. So in a state of default, that's what will happen. Like when you sometimes hear a tune and it's catchy and you find yourself humming it all day, despite yourself, you can't even stop. It keeps coming back in the head because you set a groove in the mind. Now, if the groove of the mind is one of fear and anxiousness, and you keep thinking of the fear and anxiousness, what will coronavirus, what will COVID-19 do to the economy? What will it do to my life? What will it do to me personally? What will it do to my family? It's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. I'm worried. I'm worried. You're setting down that groove stronger and deeper, and therefore you worry more. To counter that, I have to use meditative practice to set down a new pathway. Different nerve end fibers, different pathway of neurotransmitting flow, a positive one. And if I practice that over and over again, the result is that the old path will become, so to speak, disused. Weeds will grow over it. We won't be wanting to walk that way. We will be wanting to utilize the new one. And it's only through repetitive practice of that focus that will allow us to set down positivity in the place of negativity. Okay, so I've shown you here two Jewish-oriented pathways. Now, both of them have no necessary religiosity about it, because meditation is a tool. Do you think breathing is Jewish? Breathing is breath. Eating is Jewish. Eating is eating. We can make it Jewish in the way that we utilize it. Likewise with meditation. What am I saying? I'm saying I want to internalize wisdom. I want to create positivity. These things are neutral in their own methodological approach, and yet the goal is absolutely Jewish because I'm practicing a mitzvah in so doing.
Fantastic question. You're a very accomplished man. You're a young man, and in your few years in life, you've accomplished so much. So you've been a businessman. You've been a teacher. You were actually my teacher in school. That's where I actually learned something, some Talmud and you've been around. You've been part of many Jewish organizations, and you've been teaching. And yet, after having contributed to the community and done so much, I'm speaking for you right now. You discovered this need, and the need was something new for the Jewish community. And then was born Spirit Grow. My question to you is as follows. There were many synagogues in the Melbourne Jewish community. There were many Jewish organizations in the Melbourne Jewish community. There were many schools. Thank God, it's a wonderful community. And yet, what it appears to me is that you said to yourself, something is missing. And you created something that's really novel. And I think it's forward thinking, and it's different than most of the status quo of the many other Jewish synagogues and schools and communities. Here we have where we have a lot of Jewish practice and a lot of Jewish communities that aren't necessarily tapped into this wisdom that you're describing. And my question is, how does that operate, or what is the novelty of what you're describing? Flesh it out for us of, those who are, this embarking on the classic Jewish life that didn't necessarily focus on these important tools. And if you go back historically, maybe they weren't even able to have the luxury to focus on them, because trying to wake up and survive and be healthy another day was of more importance. And now we live in a world, thank God, not right now, but where we have our security for today and tomorrow is fine, thank God. And now So what is this new addition, or what is this new twist, or what is this need that you felt that was lacking in the general Jewish community? And I would say not just in Melbourne, but I would say in any Jewish community, most Jewish communities around the world, that you, together with your new center of Spirit Grow, contributed and changed the landscape of Jewish life there.
Very interesting, Ellie. I have to attribute any of these accomplishments to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe put me on the road, and I have been on the road for some 25, 30 years. What do I mean by putting me on the road is that the Rebbe advised me to travel and teach, not just in my home community of Melbourne. And that's why I've had the good fortune of visiting over 500 cities of the world and lecturing. But in so doing, at one stage, it occurred to me that the world was moving into a different phase, both Jewish and non-Jewish. And that phase was deepening its quest. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody was searching out where is Nepal and going out to the east. It means that people were asking themselves, what am I doing here in life? And I identified 4 areas of this quest: health and wellness, and hence the mushrooming of health and wellness centers and the use of higher involvement in alternative therapies and the like. The second area was management, time management, personal management. People wanted, in a more complex world, to learn how to organize themselves better, how to organize their mind, how to organize their hands and feet, and how to organize themselves in context of their day's activities. That's the second area. The third area was the area of relationships. People were beginning to question relationships. What does it mean to enter into deep relationships? Relationships had become rather shallow in many respects and temporary. We'd gone through a phase where depth of relationship was being eroded, and people felt that lack. And were there tools to be able to repair? Were there tools to be able to deepen? There was a wish, a yearning to have deep relationships. So there evolved all sorts of different, relationship training programs. And then, of course, the dominant one, spirituality, the fourth one. Spirituality with a small s, probably identified again with depth of life. So it encompassed things like ecological concerns, green, the planet, and making sure that it survives, kindness to animals, non-animal testing, concern for logging as spoiling the atmosphere. But of course, spirituality also meant a search and quest within. Who am I? Can I, in some shape or form, make a discovery of my deeper self? Can I achieve nirvana, a state of height of happiness? All these things, which are under the rubric of the word spirituality with a small s, these are the 4 that I noticed in my travels around the world was questing for. And I knew that Judaism has responses to this, very adequate responses, not only for the Jewish people, but for people at large. So I turned my attention to be able to take these 4 and apply them in a Jewish context, in a Jewish sense, hence the birth of Spirit Grow, the center. And I honestly believe that all synagogues, in fact, all Jewish centers, should be very much geared towards these 4 arenas from a Jewish point of view. That a synagogue need not be simply a place for the very few who relatively enjoy or appreciate what davening and prayer is, or have a guilt complex and must therefore go to shul, otherwise they can't live with themselves, or happen to have a yortzeit or some anniversary they need to celebrate, a bar mitzvah. There must be something more in those few hours, and there must be more to a building that calls itself a synagogue than simply being a house of prayer. And that indeed was the format of Spirit Grow. We began as a weekday series of seminars in these 4 areas. And subsequently, we evolved also a synagogue, a prayer service that was concomitant with these, so that our davening includes meditation. Our davening includes nigun, the use of music to allow the neshama to flow. It includes the capacity of deepening our understanding of the words of tefillah. We have a running commentary throughout, and each time focus on different aspects. And it also has a universal sense that whatever we do creates an energy flow that affects the world at large. In other words, people feel when they come to a center like this, that it's not simply, oh, this is my Judaism, and the other 6 days of the week is the real life, but it's all holistic. It's all one. And I get my my incentive and my motivation for the week from this house called synagogue as such. So that, in a nutshell, is how Spirit Grow came to be.
Wow. So that, and it really looks like that it became very popular. So that means you really did feel the need that I think Jewish communities all over the world are picking up on a lot more today, about a greater depth in our Jewish experiences, our spiritual experiences, our faith experiences, and a more holistic approach to a lifestyle of embracing Jewish values and the mitzvot. So here's a question for you. First, I want to build on the joke that you said earlier. So the same Zen master who's buying his hot dog from the hot dog stand, so I think he asked for one with all, one with everything, as you said.
One with everything.
One with everything.
Yeah.
So the continuation is that the hot dog master says, sure, that'll be $3. So the Zen master pulls out a $5 bill out of his pocket and he gives it to the hot dog man. And the hot dog man takes the $5, puts it in the cash register, and ends the sale. So the Zen master is standing and he says, sir, can I help you? Anything wrong? He says, where's my change? So the hot dog seller says, change must come from within.
Good.
So this leads me to my question. They say that a student of meditation once approached his master, his guru, and he says, Rabbi, my dear master, how long will it take for me to achieve the enlightenment in life that I'm looking for? So the master thinks for a moment and he says, about 10 years. He says, and what if I work more diligently? I work faster, I double my efforts. Then how long will it take? The master thinks again and he says, about 20 years. No, that one didn't go.
No,
point is what we're seeing from what you're describing. This is a difficult, ongoing process in life, which is something that a lot of us are not good at. We're good at, finding a day or a moment or an occasional inspiration to try to tap into. And then days go by, weeks go by, we forget about that. And then we realize how much we're missing it and how much we need it. And we try to revisit it. But it seems like it needs to be an ongoing, systematic process, a system in our life that we subscribe to, which means it's a change of lifestyle. It's not a change because one day we got in the mood, but it's a change of lifestyle, which I think is a big challenge. And I'd like to hear from you more about that lifestyle that helps us live in that zone. And one more point to add to that, and with a bit of a challenging question, is earlier you described this ideal, surreal scenario. I'm adding a little bit to what you said, but the person wakes up in the morning, he's refreshed, he got his full 8 hours sleep undisturbed, he sleeps well. He wakes up, he's feeling on top of the world, he gets his 20-minute workout in, there's a coffee waiting for him. And, everything is working out fine. And then he has the chance to sit down and practice his meditation. And he has the chance to enjoy his prayer. He has all the time in the world. Nobody's bothering him. Nobody's pressuring him. And he manages to build this, discovery, this consciousness, this reality that will propel him into a very meaningful, purposeful, productive day. Amazing. But I want to present a different scenario that may be more common among many people. You wake up in the morning, you didn't sleep very well. You're not feeling very refreshed. The kids disturbed your sleep or whatever. You wake up and you check your phone and you're bombarded with emails and messages, customers or others. There's a panic, there's a crisis, there's a fire burning. Now your day is already getting planned out. You go to the kitchen, there is no coffee. You ran out of coffee yesterday, you forgot to buy a new coffee. You're trying to get your day started, and now it's in this pandemic, and one kid, his iPad was not charged, so he can't even start school. And another kid, the login is not even working, so you got to contact the school technician to figure out what's the ID. You can't even get in there. And then there's so much going on that you're like, you've had it, and you're ready to break loose, and you're almost, chas v'shalom, you're almost going to bark. You're going to bark at somebody. If it's not your spouse or if it's not your children, you're going to, somewhere it's going to have to let itself out, because not too much is going wrong. And then you pause and you say, 1 second, let's kick in meditation over here, because I got to get control of my life. It's already 11:30 and I haven't started my day, and I haven't even managed to control anything in the home. And how am I going to get to work? But I don't know, can I kick in at 11:30? And what would I do in the next 5 minutes if I could create 5 minutes for myself going outside? Is there such a thing? Or how would we manage that versus the ideal scenario that we mentioned earlier? And how do we make it more of a system in our life?
Okay, well put, Ellie. How do we create in the moment a default response where we automatically move to a positive spin on the same neutral circumstance, as opposed to a negative spin, which makes that circumstance appear negative? Let me use the analogy of learning to play piano. Say amongst us, there are people who would like to learn piano. We've got a bit more time now. We're in social isolation, or we may be in lockdown. Let me learn piano. Well, you know what? Being a modern person, I'm not going to learn piano in the old-fashioned way of learning scales and playing scales repetitively, boringly, etc. So what will I do? I'm going to spend a year studying music, the theory of music. I'm going to study the great musicians. I'm going to study the biographies of the Tchaikovskys and the Haydns and the Mozarts and Chopins, etc. I'm going to study different instruments. What are their different tonal qualities? How does one actually differ in context of music from the other? I will learn how to read notes and be able to recognize even the mathematical constructs of interrelationships between the notes as such. At the end of a year, I am proficient in the theory of music. I'm ready. So I sit at the keyboard and I take my fingers and I say, fingers, do your stuff. And the fingers don't do their stuff. And I'm in a wonderment. How is it that I know music, but that the extremities of my body don't seem to comply? It doesn't make sense. What part of me knows and doesn't know music? I know music. And of course, you then change your approach and you say, I'm going to do the old-fashioned approach. I'm going to practice. I'm going to learn the scales boringly over and over again. And guess what? After a while, the fingers are able to express what is in the knowledge quotient of the person. What is the difference between these two? Well, it's obvious, because when you studied music, as I said earlier, you made certain connections in the brain. But the connection between the brain and the fingers hadn't been established by a pathway. And only by the doingness of it were you able to develop that groove of the mind that connected to the fingers. Right, that's the analogy. Now let's go back to the nimshal, to the origin, what I wanted to suggest. Unless we learn the scales of consciousness, it means every moment will simply grab us as it chooses. If there happens to be something happening which is not to my liking, my default pathway will be a negative interpretation, because that is my default. That's, some say, the natural disposition of people. However, if I do my practice and make my connection to positivity, then I will be able to put a positive spin on everything. All right? In my classes, the pass mark is 7 out of 10. You don't have to get 10 out of 10. But imagine how I improve from 0 out of 10, where everything throws me off constantly, to at least 7 out of 10. So if I practice meditatively, which means to learn to retrain my mind in terms of interpretation of the moment, positively rather than negatively, something I can elaborate on and will, then under those circumstances, every one of the instances that you propose that sometimes faces us in the mornings, I'll be reinterpret. Now, this is called emunah and bitachon. The words emunah and bitachon are usually translated as faith and trust. Now, they're big words. I don't really know what the English words mean. And as I have mentioned on previous occasion when we met, the Lubavitcher Rebbe provides us with a pragmatic understanding of the process of emunah and the process of bitachon. Let me share it with you like this. Emunah is the belief that everything that's happened in the past is for your current good. Bitachon is the belief that the challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. In other words, emunah deals from the past to the present. Whatever has happened to me in the past, even God forbid it's been painful, it is somehow for my current good, past to present. Bitachon, the challenge I face now will have a positive outcome, present to future. The challenge I face now will have a positive outcome. These are axiomatic propositions. What do I mean by that? They're not provable, and they're also not disprovable. There's a 50-50 percentage probability that tomorrow is going to be much worse than today or much better than today, unless you are a prophet. P-H-E-T, not F-I-T. Unless you're a prophet, you cannot tell. And I'm going to assume that amongst us, there are very few prophets. And therefore, under those circumstances, what we're going to discover is that we have a choice about tomorrow. And I can choose to move into the positive or negative. Through meditation, I can imprint upon myself, through practice, that my automatic interpretation of the child waking me up in the morning and I've had a bad night's sleep, I can interpret that positively. And that's a matter of practice, where my default lies, where my automatic response mechanism lies, etc. And it's the continuous practice. So I would be advising you, after we do a little bit of meditation practice, to actually utilize exercises 3 times a day. It might end up being only 1 minute in the morning, 1 minute midday, and 1 minute in the evening. Initially, it'll be longer before you get the practice to be able to reduce it down to that time frame. But by doing it every time and intensifying it as a consequence, you become different. So in response to your question, how do I actually meet up with the day and allow the day to be a purview of positivity? It won't just happen because we have a moment of insight through someone reading a book, or a moment of insight because of a lecture, or because we have a moment of insight from our own view of nature, whatever might be the case. It'll only be imprinted through repetitive practice throughout our life. And in so doing, we do become positively disposed. And we're able to exude that, as I hinted earlier, to others all around me, and create a much more positive atmosphere and much more positive world.
Beautiful. So I think we've laid down a very strong groundwork over here. And it would be almost time to maybe move into a more practical side of this workshop, where we're hoping that you'll provide us with some real tools and mechanisms for the meditation, and then do with us a brief meditation together. So just before we get there, there's a couple more questions that were coming in that I'll see if we can bring up. one is actually going to lead us into the next section because somebody asked, and I want to read the question because it's very honest. And he says, Rabbi Laibl, over the years, I've attended your lectures and workshops. Unfortunately, I've never been able to master proper meditation, to be in that state of mind free from foreign and disturbing thoughts, to totally connect. I've done your breathing techniques, focusing on one thought to letting my mind relax. It all seems not to work. Looking forward to tonight's workshop, if you could help me with some techniques. So I'm sure, and I hope that we'll all get out from this workshop what he's been looking for. Another question, dear Rabbi Laibl Wolf, I'm so happy that Hashem put me on my path and that I met you, etc., etc. I'm happy to learn from you because my husband thinks that meditation is only for non-Jews. So I'm happy to learn from you tonight. Okay, so where can we read about meditation in our Jewish texts? Did the biblical characters meditate? And I guess maybe you can point us into where someone could access more about this from spiritual and classic Jewish texts.
One of the currently unfortunate circumstances we face is that the authentic writings about meditation have not been translated into English. Now, Aryeh Kaplan wrote a book called Jewish Meditation, I think is the title of the book. But what he did there was to draw out some of the obtuse formats that were used in minority groupings over history. And I personally would not advocate that anyone utilize any of those techniques. Now, Aryeh Kaplan did a very wonderful, serviceable job in being able to give us a historical overview of these minority techniques, but by and large, they're not really applicable to our life circumstances today. And in many instances, if you and I were to practice those, it might do us a disservice rather than a service. So in English language, there's very little I can point to as such. And it might be that the only way to access it is by going to individuals who are speaking about it and teaching it and sharing it in this particular way. Yes, I'd like to enter into some workshop setting at the moment. And to the individual who said that they don't seem to be able to create that opportunity despite doing it, very hard for me at long distance to be able to advise. Because when I work with a person, whether it be over the Skype or whether it be in person, face to face, then I have a sense of what's really happening dynamically with them. And there are many other factors that come into play than simply do this and come back and tell me later. I have to observe what they're doing, and I have to be able to hear them describe what they're doing before I can actually allow them to move perhaps in a more corrected manner to a goal that they seek. I want to do two things, Ellie. I want to do an exercise which firstly creates a vacuum. It doesn't mean the emptying of the mind, but it does mean to break from the stress cycle. You can't adopt something until you create the space for it. And therefore, to be able to create that space, we need to focus on something neutral. Now, the problem with stress is that stress eats away at our body. We know that the correlation of stress and illness is very, very high. And therefore, I need to break the stress cycle. So I'm going to use an exercise based on the focusing on breath. Now, focusing on breath is common to many pathways and in many therapeutic settings. And that is because it works for that specific purpose. Breath means a very steady in and out movement of the body, so it's easy to focus on. Jewishly, of course, it's much more profound because the Hebrew word for breath is neshima, and the Hebrew word for soul is neshama, obviously etymologically connected. In other words, breath reveals the state and flow of the soul. It's the first level of the soul's expression through the body. an essential expression for the body. And it also emulates God's breath of life into the human being and into the world. The metaphor of breathing is used in a divine context because breath comes from deep within and it's constant. So it's as if the world is being breathed into reality. So that's the connection of the soul of the world and breath in creation, and also me, the maintenance of my life. And our breath is essential as a metaphor for the divine breath breathing into me. So there's deeper implications. So I'm going to take you through a breath-based exercise, which I'll lead you through. But the purpose of that is not any inspirational aspect, but just to create space for the second phase of my exercise, which will be, how do I move from a position of feeling vulnerable, intimidated by circumstances of today, to a position of confidence and a sense of security. And I'll be using a visualization in order to begin that process to become part of your repertoire of the mind. So let me practice these two with you, and then we can have a chat afterwards and see how we can actually extend beyond that. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to adopt, wherever you are in your room, a position of symmetry. If you're in a chair, feet symmetrically on the ground, hands resting on your knees and thighs, back fairly straight without being too rigid, head well balanced on your body, and gently close your eyes. And just become aware of your breath entering and exiting quite normally. And if you can, I'd like you to breathe in and out through your nose. And I want you to deepen and slow down comfortably the in-breath and the out-breath through your nose. Become aware of the difference in temperature of the air entering the nostrils compared to the temperature of the air exiting from your nose. Slightly cooler air entering and somewhat warmer air exiting. And just stay focused on that temperature difference, experiencing the coolness of the in-breath and the warmth of the out-breath. Allow your shoulders to slump a little, relaxed. Slow down and deepen the breathing even more, but comfortably so. And with your next breaths, I want you to direct the breath down to your abdomen, seemingly past your chest and lungs. Collect it in the abdomen and then expel it from the abdomen. So you'll take a deep breath in, expanding your abdomen as you're breathing in, and then pulling your abdomen in to push the air out. Let's try that again. Take a deep breath in, expanding your abdomen, collecting the air there, and then pull your tummy in to force the air out again. The trick is to expand your abdomen as you're breathing in. Practice that for a few breaths because it's counterintuitive. And now let's lend some rhythm to the breathing We'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and breathe out for a count of 4. So take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. Abdominally, in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And just continue breathing abdominally, rhythmically, gracefully, smoothly, a perfect circle for the cycle. One round action. And just become aware how relaxed you have become in the space of a few short minutes, and you have managed to cut yourself off from any previous thought patterns. And having created a reprieve from any stressors or anxieties, I want to move to the second phase of our exercises, and just follow my voice. I want you to feel a glow in the center of your head, a glow of light in the middle of your head, warm, comfortable, enlightening, creating brightness in your head. Intensify that glow and allow it to fully expand throughout your head and face area. Intensify it more and direct it down your neck into your torso, chest and back. So you start to feel the chest cavity light up with brightness within, the glow from the head extending through the body. And now intensifying it further so it flows through your limbs, through your arms, through your wrists, through your hands, through your fingers. And now allow the glow from the head to extend down your thighs, legs, feet, and toes, so that your whole body feels comfortably aglow, warm, pleasant. Allow the glow to intensify now so that it reaches the surface of your skin, all over, your skin beginning to glow and emanating that glow around you, around your body, an aura all around your body. We call that aura the Magen Avraham, Abraham's shield. You have now become aware of a protective shield all around you, emanating from your inner mind through to your outer body. This aura spiritually envelops you in a cocoon of safety. Intensify that aura so that it extends to those around you in your room, even throughout your home, so that your glow envelops your home, protecting it, giving it an aura of positivity. Allow the Magen Avraham, Abraham's shield, to do its work of keeping you safe. And it's through your awareness of it that the safety works. Extend that aura beyond your home into the world, bringing that sense of security into the world at large, affecting others with your aura, which is something real. You affect the world. And in this way, you'll be able to confront all of life's exigencies with equanimity, with a sense of inner peace, safety, in a sharing, compassionate way. Experience again the glow emanating from the center of your head throughout your body to the surface of the skin all around you. Feel its protective force. I assure you it's always there, but you activate it by being aware of it. Focus again on your breath, breathing in and out through the nose, feeling cooler air entering and warmer air exiting. Begin moving your fingers and your toes. Wherever you are, move your fingers now, move your toes. And when you feel ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back into the here and now in a renewed state of peace and security. Gently open your eyes. Now, doing something like that once may be a wonderful experience. But if you do it 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 times a year, for 120 years, it should work. But what I'm saying to you, practice, practice, because there's a gradual continuation of change, as I said before and explained before. Let me pause and hear from you.
I think my wife is going to be very jealous how well I'm going to sleep tonight. maybe she was practicing in the home there. Maybe she did it. So that was really, really beautiful. That put me into a zone, in a very peaceful place, into my place, right? Where Nothing else was hijacking me. It was just me taking control of me. So that's precious. That's precious to be able to achieve that and perform that once a day, 3 times a day. It's. I have a couple questions, just to break this down a little bit before we conclude. In that initial stage of trying to wean away from the distractions and the tensions and the stresses, initially, I was feeling it wasn't so much I was necessarily relieving from the stresses. I was more just replacing. Instead of the focus was on that, I was becoming very focused on other things. So we did focus on things within, on breath, on body, on touch and feel. So was I just replacing one thought with another thought? Or more than that? Just go ahead.
So God created us in a wonderful way that we can't think of two thoughts at the same time. It's rather interesting. You can oscillate quickly between thoughts, but in the one instance of time, you can't think of two thoughts simultaneously. And therefore, we can replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts and thereby change the ambience of our body and our consciousness. By being able to practice that switch and being able, therefore, to be switched on to the positive much more often for a longer duration as we practice, the result is a general sense of positivity. So the answer is yes. We were replacing one with the other. I was replacing what might have been a previous stream of consciousness with another stream of consciousness, deliberately taking advantage of God's creation of ourselves that we can't think of two things at the same time. And that's why I say one of the major differences from many of the Eastern meditations is where there's a wish and a claim to create nothingness or emptiness or detachment and the like. Judaism is all about filling the mind, using positive consciousness, and interestingly, attaching ourselves to the world, not detaching, not seeing the world as scary, not seeing matter as something that we should view with contempt, but rather to be able to elevate it and to connect to it, attach ourselves to it in a positive way that elevates it in the very process and provides meaning to everything.
Wow, yeah, beautiful. With your permission, I have 2 more questions. First question is what is the role of music or nigun, whether it's playing music in the background during a meditation or singing or humming music to ourselves? Can you explain if that's a good thing, a necessary thing, or how that can be employed in our meditative experiences?
The nigun has been described as the pen of the soul. What we do by speaking is we reveal that which is hidden. And that's why the metaphoric use of the description of creation is God spoke the world into existence. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia. God's speech, because the ultimate functionality of speech is to reveal that which is hidden. When I speak, I reveal myself to you. If I merely think, then you don't know what I am about. Therefore, speech means to reveal. And what does it reveal? It reveals the way that the neshama is flowing through the body and my mind consciousness in that moment. Is it adequate? Of course it's not adequate. Can I possibly pack into the containers of words everything that is implicit within me at that time that I want to convey? No. We struggle for words. The poet struggles for words in order to expose the soul of the moment. So it's partial packaging that is revealed as such. But a more profound way in which we can reveal the flow of the soul is through music. Music, especially, I'm talking about wordless, nigun, tune, where the neshama is able then to flow out in a much more pristine and purer state, revealing itself in a dimension that words cannot. And that's how we use nigun. We use nigun as a way of soul expression, but there's a biofeedback loop. By practicing and using the nigun, it changes us as a consequence. We allow the nigun to allow the soul to flow, but then we become enveloped, as per our meditation, by the atmosphere, so to speak, of that nigun, and that then changes us even further. So nigun as a focus in a meditative format even is a very powerful tool.
Okay, thank you. My final question, and I was just looking on the Facebook if there's any more questions, but I don't see. So my final question is, would you mind telling us a little about your encounter with the Dalai Lama?
Okay. Firstly, I didn't travel to India. I didn't travel to see the Dalai Lama. I knew of the Dalai Lama, of course, and I always had positive impressions of the kinds of things he said and does. I was teaching at the time at the University of Melbourne a course in Jewish spirituality. And I had about 150 students attending, and amongst Jewish and non-Jewish, and amongst the students were 3 Buddhist monks. And the course that I was teaching, the section of the course was comparative Eastern and Jewish pathways. Hence, these 3 monks took a curiosity to it and attended. I didn't have much discussion with them, and I was teaching. At that time, the Dalai Lama happened to be visiting Australia. And apparently he got wind, I suspect through those 3 monks, that there's this curious rabbi teaching comparative Buddhist and Jewish teachings. And it must have piqued his interest somehow, because I get a call from his entourage saying, would I have the time to spend with the Dalai Lama to discuss some things? So I was thinking about it. I said, out of curiosity, that sounds like a good idea. So I said I would. So they asked me, would you be available on the Monday morning at 4 o'clock? So I didn't want to be looking foolish. I said, yeah, 4 o'clock, I'm always up by then. No problems whatsoever. So, and of course, to make myself look a little bit important, I brought 2 friends with me as in my entourage to come to see the Dalai Lama. I wanted to get some photos of the occasion. Not because I needed to put them up on my wall, but I thought this would be really good to have a contact point with Jews, Jewish people involved in Buddhism. If I was meeting their leader, then perhaps I could have some rapport and take the Jewish people and get them to be more aware of their Jewish heritage. So one of my friends who came with me had a camera, which he was going to somehow smuggle through, sneak out, and take a photo, which I could then subsequently use for that purpose. So here we are, we're coming to the Dalai Lama, we come into his hotel room, he was staying at a hotel here, and what am I faced with? A cameraman on a tripod with a beautiful big camera. The Dalai Lama wants to have a photo of himself with the rabbi. So I didn't need to have my smuggled camera. In short, the Dalai Lama wanted to understand and have responses to 2 questions. Number 1, what's the secret of Jewish survival? He explained that his people had moved now into an exile and had been so at that time for 60 years already. And we, the Jewish people, were the experts in surviving an exile, our exile being over 2,000 years. So that was one aspect of discussion. The second thing that he wanted to know is more about the nature of Jewish family life. He had heard so much about the Jewish family unit and how it kept close together and was able to be a bulwark against some of the excesses of society. Well, I didn't want to share with him that with our assimilation rate and with our becoming part of wider society, in many ways and in too many instances, we were becoming part of the problem and not the solution. So I described to him some of the traditional mitzvot that deal with Jewish family life and keep us as a family. And that was the basis of the discussion that we had together as such. And it was about 2.5 hours. He spoke a good English, although we had an interpreter there. And we walked away, I think, mutually very satisfied. I think he's a very good person. He's a very jovial individual. He enjoys a joke and to laugh. He is very curious. He will ask penetrating questions. And I think his message is a good message, one of compassion and empathy and doing good things in the world. And because Jewish people by nature quest to that, and our synagogues and our Jewish leaders don't provide the spiritual depth by and large that many of our Jewish people are questing for, they very often move towards where they can find that, too often in Buddhism as such, believing that it might be found there. So going back to one of your earlier points, by way of a conclusion, it's terribly important that our synagogues, our Jewish centers, learn and study Jewish spiritual principles, Chassidus, explaining the deeper teachings of Kabbalah, and in so doing have the lexicon, the language, to be able to speak to the soul of our Jewish people in a way that they find meaningful and relevant and contemporary in our setting. I know that Baruch Hashem, your synagogue happens to have a rabbi who does impart that, but you're by far the exception rather than the rule. So I want to wish you a lot of hatzlacha in continuing and developing and evolving. And to the participants who are here together with us, I want you to be able to take more and more away from my wonderful nephew and everything that he's doing, but to spread the word. In other words, allow yourselves to be living examples of what we are talking about, and in so doing become the diplomats for Jewish spiritual life, doing the mitzvot in a much more profound way, and thereby changing yourself and changing the world. I thank you very much for the opportunity of spending time together with you.
Thank you, Laibl. I want to tell you that I hear that the Dalai Lama is asked very often the question, can you please tell us about your encounter with Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf from Australia? So,
I'll send you a photo so that you can actually share it with people.
Okay, that'd be nice. Really, thank you so much. This was special. We could do this many more times over because there's so much we didn't even get a chance to cover, but we did cover a lot in theory and in practice. And we walk away with a lot of insights, a lot of tools, a lot of homework, because like we said, it's fantastic to have this hour together, but now we have to go back to our lives, and tomorrow is coming and the next day is coming, and to try to implement this during this time so crucial, during all times so crucial. So Laibl, we hope you and your wife, my aunt Leah, and your family are healthy and well, and your children and grandchildren and great-grandchild. And we wish everybody only good health and happiness. Stay safe, keep in touch, work hard. We'll help each other get through this and get through the story called life. And
Ellie,
yeah.
Can I just interrupt that for a moment and say, please share my email with people. I put out daily 60-second meditations for people. I'm happy to put you on my WhatsApp list for that, or you may want to facilitate that yourself. I'm more than happy to stay in touch.
Sure, I'll put that on the in the comments in the Facebook video, and anyone can reach out to me to get that address.
Fine.
Thank you everybody for joining us this evening, or if you'll be watching this later. And we wish you a good night, or a good morning, a good day. We're ending our day, Laibl. You're just starting your day, so it wasn't a 4 a.m. start. So you're.
Thank you very much. Be well, everybody.
Be well.
Bye.
Thank you so much. All the best.